Considering how weak he is, there are an awful lot of Legion mains out there, and I'm pretty sure I'm about to piss off at least one of them. Legion's biggest strength is his ability to easily injure multiple survivors. Even with his ability to finish survivors being as pathetic as it is, having the entire survivor team injured against a 4.6 killer means you can either slow the game to a crawl with healing and mends, or you can just hard snowball everyone being a hit from death at all times. That works pretty well against bad survivors, but if you're fighting a team that has half a brain, there's no reason you should get at these 3 to 4 man frenzies, and I can prove it with math. For a moment, let's just ignore how a good team will spread out against a Legion. Legion's baseline frenzy causes him to run at 5.2 meters a second for 10 seconds. That means that if a survivor is running directly away from him, he'll close 1.2 meters of distance for every second for a maximum of 12 meters closed. There's also the lunge to consider. That gives him a 1.5x speed multiplier for half a second, allowing him to close an additional 1.9 meters with a well-timed lunge. I'm using half a second for the value of a lunge duration to be generous here, since the wiki's a little bit undecided on that. The actual page for attack says it's a third of a second, but Myers' page says a normal lunge is half a second. I'll just to give Legion every edge I possibly can, at least for his baseline, since I'm not going to use the stolen sketchbooks for the example here. I'll go with half a second. There's also the actual length of his knife to consider, with which I can't find a number for, so I'm just going to assume it's 1.1 meters for the sake of having a clean number. With all that combined, you can hit them if they are no more than 15 meters away when you start your running. For your first frenzy hit, that really doesn't matter, since you're usually going to turn on frenzy when you're already close enough to guarantee the hit. But if they have even a little bit of situational awareness, it will absolutely gut your ability to get chain hits. Probably the most common way I see Legions getting chain hits is that they find a guy who appears to be alone and then track down additional targets with killer instincts. Against halfway decent players, this shouldn't work, because Legion isn't even a little bit subtle. The moment he hits his first survivor, he pops up a construction vest orange bar under the screens of every survivor. If they see that, hear your terror radius, and don't start running away immediately to prevent your snowball, you're fighting a bunch of potatoes. Since they should start running away the moment the first hit lands, if not earlier, this means you won't get resets against good survivors if they start with more than 15 meters of distance, which is basically fucking nothing. But okay, let's be a little bit generous and assume you've come across a pair of survivors doing a gen together. If they want to avoid giving you a chain hit, they would need to open a gap of 15 meters between them in the time between them noticing you and you getting hit on one of them. Since they should both be moving in opposite directions at 4 meters a second, it only takes 1.875 seconds for such a gap to open. Seeing as Legion's normal stats give stationary survivors at least a 6.95 second warning of his approach, it's not exactly an out-of-this-world expectation that they start running 2 seconds before he gets close enough to hit. I'll spare you the math on the scenarios for 3 to 4 group survivors, but the final result is that a 3-man cluster would need to split 2.65 seconds before a hit, and a 4-man cluster would need to split 3.75 seconds before a hit in order to prevent a single chain hit. It gets increasingly harder to pull this off, especially considering how environments can make ideal splits impossible for larger groups. But if you're trying to 4-man a generator in Legion's terror radius, it's your own damn fault if things go south. Okay, so unless they're all clumped together in an enclosed space, there's no reason you should be getting more than 1, maybe 2 frenzy hits per activation against good survivors. Is it at least a good time saver, since you got that first frenzy hit really quick? I mean, kinda. You get the first attack pretty fast, but if you're not getting value by hitting more than 1 guy, you're probably going to end up wasting more time than you'd save if it compares just smacking them normally. Okay, say you run up to a guy in frenzy, smack them, catch back up to them with the frenzy reset, fatigue, and then pursue for normal M1. They'll open a gap of 1.2 meters during their 1.5 second haste, and at 5.2 meters a second, it'll take you 2.5 total seconds to catch back up after that hit. Then there's the 4 second fatigue, during which you are massively slowed. I don't have a number for exactly how much you're slowed by, but I'm going to use 1.61 meters a second since it feels about the same speed as a reloading clown. Going off that assumption, fatiguing will cause a gap of 9.56 meters to open. After accounting for the reach of your knife and the distance closed by your lunge, you're left with 7.01 meters of distance, which would take 11.683 seconds to close. After combining that figure with all the other time sinks related to this course of action, you'll end up with it taking 18.683 seconds between hitting them for the first time and the first moment you could possibly get your second hit. Assuming they don't stop at any point. Compared to the time it would take you to do the same thing with just normal M1s, it actually ends up taking you almost 2.5 seconds longer to do with your power. But, that doesn't take into account the time you could have saved by ignoring loops on your first hit or getting in range for your first hit faster. So in reality, it would save you a bit of time, but it isn't that much. So if you're not getting multiple frenzy hits, you're not getting enough value. There are also a few texts you can do with Legion to make his power lethal, but every single one of those is reliant on the survivors not understanding how Legion works. Yes, you can kill people by grabbing them out of lockers in Frenzy, but the kind of survivors who let you do that are the same ones who complain about Old Freddy being OP. Alright, that'll about do me for my rant. If you want to tell me how wrong I am to my face, I'll put my Twitch in the description.